Okay, so Suzanne, this is my first interview with you in a while. We're going to talk today about the recent budget in relation to ODA, and we're going to talk about this year's Dóchas Awards and the work of Coalition 2030 and the SDGs. Can you start off by telling us the view of Dóchas in respect of the recent budget in relation to Overseas Development Aid, or ODA as it's called?
Yeah, great. No, and thanks the opportunity to share that. Basically, on budget day, the government announced that they will increase the spend on overseas aid by 21 million. So that will bring it up roughly next year to about 0.31% of gross national income. Now, for us, it was important that there was an increase, but it is important to remind your listeners that the international target, which Ireland has regularly committed to, is 0.7% of gross national income. That is about 70 cents of every €100 to be spent on what is a really critical part of the aid system, overseas development aid. Again, it's important to remind your listeners that why we keep focusing in on ODA is that we really believe this is the kind of money that gets the people most in need. Partly because it's channeled through Irish NGOs and civil society in general, but also to the UN and other bilaterals, and to really get to parts, to marginalised communities, to forgotten emergencies and all the rest. And very few other pockets of money do that. And that's why, in a way, we're encouraged by this increase, but the government need to do more.
Do we have a roadmap yet as to how the UN commitment by the Irish government will be achieved over the next few years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose this idea of a roadmap is something we've been constantly pushing for. It's important to say the government, you know, through the Oireachtas and all the rest, have published a plan because they know and they want to commit to getting to 0.7%, but they won't publish it. So every year we go through that, will they, won't they, increase the percentage. So at the moment, there's still no movement on that. But it is important to say that the Taoiseach did meet with us just before the budget, which really was appreciated. And you could really tell his commitment to investing in overseas development. And again, here it is important to say that there is a positive picture here in Ireland. Earlier in the year, we got a new international development policy called A Better World. And there really was kind of high-level political commitment with both the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach launching that. And they put a lot of kind of energy and their own political commitment behind that development policy. We now just need to see it implemented.
Okay, to move on, earlier this week you held the Dóchas Awards 2019. Could you tell us a bit about them and who won awards at it this year?
Yeah, the Dóchas Awards is our annual event to say, you know, we want to kind of celebrate the richness and diversity of the sector. I'll be honest with you that working for NGOs, we're a pretty humble bunch and we tend to not recognise our strengths and our achievements. So the awards are very much the opportunity to do that. Importantly, every year we invite a Lifetime Achievement Award winner. And this year we were delighted that Mary Lawler, who set up Frontline Defenders, has been an absolutely tireless human rights defender, won the award and was there to take it. I just thought it might be worth sharing. She kind of said a few words as she received the award from Ruairí de Burca from Irish Aid. And one line that really came out from her, we asked her, so Mary, give us some inspiration for the future as NGOs. What should we be thinking about? And she said, you know what, we need to be braver, we need to be more political, we need to be feminist. So that was a really good kind of inspiring message from her. Our other award winners, we had Mary Sweeney, who's worked in the Irish NGO sector for many, many years, both with Concern, with Trócaire, and now with Self-Help Africa. She got what's called the Global Citizen Award. And in many ways, this award is about somebody who really personifies exactly what international development is about. And for her, you know, she came across it. It's all about people. It's about kindness, about resilience, and about how we relate to people in very, very dire circumstances. And Mary Sweeney really personified that. So I think we were all delighted that she got this award. Just very briefly, two other awards. One was around public engagement. And here our finalists were gold. They have a great campaign around Syria. We had Children in Crossfire for their work on the SDGs and getting the conversations out to communities in Ireland on that. And our award winner was Trócaire for their amazing work on their fossil fuel divestment campaign. The final award was around collaboration. And again, let's remember for Dóchas, that's what we're about. But collaboration in this day and age, where we talk a lot about the fragility of the multilateral system, the kind of breakdown of communities and all the rest, collaboration has to be up front and central. So in this award, we had Stand, a Suez initiative. We have Trócaire again for their collaboration with the Irish Girl Guides. And the winner was Goal for their collaboration with Dropbox. So it was a great morning. We held it at the Smock Alley Theatre, which was absolutely fantastic. And again, it was just a celebration. Sometimes it's also a pause for reflection and to take breath to help us with the work that we're doing. So it was a great morning.
I interviewed Mary Sweeney a few years ago. I'm glad to see she won an award, you know. Okay, Suzanne, last but not least, we're going to talk a bit about Coalition 2030. How is the work with the coalition going, Suzanne?
Well, I think in terms of the coalition, and just to remind your listeners, this really is a kind of quite a unique effort which brings colleagues from the domestic sector, from trade unions, from the international sector and from the academics to come together to say we want to work on the SDGs and we want to make sure the government is doing as much as they can to make sure that they deliver on this. So as far as the coalition is going, and at the recent stakeholder forum, there was a really good panel of 4 colleagues from the coalition just reminding us why it's important. I think you could say that that was very positive and very healthy. I suppose, though, on the SDGs in general, and particularly Ireland's performance, yeah, we'd be a little bit more concerned. It is important to say that the government kind of mobilised and they pulled together what's called a stakeholder forum. The other week it was the 5th stakeholder forum, and it was important to bring people together. And I'm always struck by, you know, the people in the room, the diversity in the room, all the work that's happening on the domestic front, on the international front. And it's important to remember there is traction around this important agenda, but there's a lot more to do. And I suppose what the coalition would be saying, and as Dóchas as an active member, is what's missing at the moment is the real kind of partnership to make sure this agenda happens, because it's so broad that no single stakeholder can do it alone, whether it's the government, civil society, the private sector, the academics. But it's not good enough just to bring us together, to keep us informed. We actually need spaces for dialogue, because there's some real kind of gaps there. There's real progress needed. And we know the solutions amongst us all if we come together. And that's a little bit what's missing at the moment. I suppose I also just were saying I was fortunate enough to be at the UN General Assembly in September in New York. This is the big annual get-together of all heads of state. And importantly, this year's, there was the Climate Summit, which many of your listeners might have heard about. Greta Thunberg making an extraordinary speech, I think, at the General Assembly. It was also followed by the SDG Summit, and importantly, a summit around the financing of the SDGs. And between all 3 of those summits, I think the kind of key headline, if you like, and this is really coming from the UN as well, that we're simply not on track. The agenda, the SDGs are due to be delivered in 2030. That's 10 years from now. I think the first 5 years we were all trying to, understand what it's about, but now we really need to see action. And the clear signature coming out from UNGA was that we're not on track. But again, I do want to say always we have to build on the positives. And it's worth saying if there was a highlight from UNGA, it has to be President Michael D. Higgins addressing the General Assembly as part of the SDG Summit. Now, as civil society, I'm afraid I didn't get into the room, and not many of my colleagues did. But the next day, I was with some civil society activists from Eastern Europe. And when they heard I was from Ireland, they turned to me and said, "Wow, your president is amazing." It's just incredible that he was able to be honest and to almost kind of speak truth to power, if you like, in his speech. And it's important to say that people are watching that, and Ireland is playing that leadership role through his kind of speeches. But I did hear from him yesterday. He was giving a speech at the Irish Red Cross event to celebrate the Geneva Conventions. And his reflection of New York was, he said, what worried me was that the politics of fear was dominating the discourse, but rather than the politics of solidarity. And let's remember, the UN is about celebrating that if we work together, we can meet all these challenges. So we really have to work harder to make sure that it's the politics of solidarity rather than fear that drives us and that helps us to meet the SDGs.
Okay, so I only have two more questions. I won't keep you all day. Just the last question on the SDGs. I spoke to Michael Ewing from the Irish Environmental Pillar on radio recently, and he noted to me a large degree of frustration with the Irish SDG Stakeholder Forum in relation to the government contribution to it. Would you share that frustration, or was the last meeting better, or what's the story?
Yeah, and obviously I would work very closely with Michael, and absolutely I share his frustrations. I think, though, what we all need to think about is, well, what are the solutions? As I say, for me, the Stakeholder Forum, if its job is to bring people together and keep people informed, that's fine. But we know it needs to go further, or we need to find other solutions. I suppose for me, and just in reflecting on that Stakeholder Forum, as I say, we've got to look for positives. What I would like to see more is, let's learn from our colleagues in other member states. I was at a session recently where I learned about what the Finns were doing, what Denmark were doing. We could really learn from that. Finland, for example, they've got a Minister of Finance who's very engaged in this. The coordination is headed by the Prime Minister's office, which is what we've been calling for here all the time. Importantly, any budget decisions have the SDGs in mind, with the SDG targets firmly as part and parcel of budget decisions. That would be fantastic to see in Ireland. They also have a much more coherent steering committee, which brings the key stakeholders together. That's the government, civil society, academics, the private sector, to actually dialogue. And that's what's missing here. Another kind of example I would take, say, from the Germans. I was hearing of this recently. They've done a peer review where they've got outsiders. They had Helen Clark, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, to come and see what they were doing. And I think even that peer review process galvanized everybody to come together to say, look, we have a national implementation plan. Let's talk about it. Where is the progress? Where are the gaps? Let's try and find some solutions. So look, there are ideas out there, and we really hope that the government will listen to try and get our structures better and to kind of mitigate some of this frustration that is definitely out there amongst civil society.
I was in touch with Minister Richard Bruton's office earlier on this week. I hope to interview him soon. I was just planning to talk to him about the environment, but he'd be the kind of main minister responsible for the SDGs in Ireland. Would he implementation?
Yeah, and again here it's important they're coordinating the response. Although, look, as you know, I'm sure in terms of the SDGs, it's got to be cross-departmental. So they do have their work cut out for them, because it's also about getting all departments to come together and all the rest. I suppose, when you do talk to Richard Bruton, it is important to bring up climate, but we need to see it in this broader framework of the SDGs. And to me, what the climate situation in Ireland shows to us is that we've got to be much more coherent in terms of what we do. And it's important to say that in terms of international development and what the Department of Finance and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Irish Aid are doing on climate to support developing countries is very positive. They are doing the right things. But then it's difficult that when you look back at home, and you see, again, I think in the newspapers this week, we came up in terms of we are still that laggard. We're still not doing enough. And it's that incoherence that the SDGs tell us that's what we need to get right. And that's where we need to have the conversations.
Okay, I'll be talking to you again about the SDGs in the not too long distant future. To come towards the end of the interview, Suzanne, do you and Dóchas have any exciting news or plans leading us into 2020 that you would like to maybe tell our listeners a bit about?
Well, for us, look, the important thing was at the beginning of this year that there was this new international development policy called A Better World. Again, what's really important behind that is the SDGs are at the centre of it, and they put really the focus on not just about leaving no one behind, but reaching the furthest behind first. And I think it's that issue around inclusion, it's that issue around equality, and it's that idea of bringing climate into development and human rights and humanitarian work is something that we really need to pay attention to. And in terms of Dóchas, what we're there to do is to facilitate some of those conversations. So look, with the year ahead, that's what we hope to do with our members, whilst also listening and trying to support them in the work that they do.